Okay guys, so in this video we are going to get extremely opinionated and try to illustrate what a bad comment is and what a good comment is. And we will do so under the worst of weather circumstances, but let's just churn through it. So we're going to cover what are comments, basically just to get that out of the way, and why are they useful, and what's a good comment and what's a bad comment, basically. So highly subjective opinions about to happen, guys. There is no right or way, like a right or wrong way to write comments. I'm just gonna go out there and say it. Every single company does it their own way. Some people have a lot of comments, some people have no comments, and there's so many philosophies. So you might as well sit down there and just try to define like what's better, single quotes versus double quotes. And basically that's how it works, right? So let's look at a few what I call bad comments. So bad comments, like a comment is just a piece of text. Like, let's be honest here, for the juniors out there, this is a comment. This is a multi-line comment. This is a single line comment in JavaScript. Every single language has comments. And the idea behind a comment is that it's just me as a programmer adding some text to describe or explain something to you as a reader of my code. These comments have no meaning whatsoever to the system, like the compiler or the runtime that uses your code doesn't care about this at all, right? So this is just for you and me, right? So for me, a bad comment is something like this. This class represents a user. Well, the class name is user, so what information did I get from this comment? Absolutely nothing. It's like, it doesn't say anything. All it is doing is that it's redeclaring something that I could infer from the username, because, or rather the class name. The class name is already telling me that this is a user. I don't need a comment to tell me that as well. This is just a wasted piece. This is just wasted text. Same thing for this. All right, so I have a function called getName on the user class. Well, if I have a comment that says get the username, okay, yeah, sure. To me, this is not really useful. Like the name of the method is actually so good that I can understand what it's, or rather, I can kind of infer what it's going to do. And that's something that you should take with you. There is a really great book called Clean Code that kind of try to illustrate or rather explains the idea of trying to express what you want to say through code, because code is quote-unquote always better than comments. Now that's a philosophical discussion, but I think that it's a valid thought that if you can write code in such a way that you don't have to have documentation or comments to explain what it's doing, you should favor that, because code is like, it's not always possible to do that, but it's really great if you can. Here we have this function. Okay, so we generate user stats, and then let's just walk through this function. Okay, right. Now you may think that this is just me making up a silly little example, but I've actually seen comments and functions and function bodies that are this and worse. I'm not even like, let's just go once again, like really slowly just scroll through all of this. So your comment is telling me right now that, all right, we generate a bunch of user statistics. Now, I will argue that this is just not good enough. There's way too much going on in this method to kind of like, all it says, it basically tells me what the method name is. That's it. That's all it's telling me. All of this stuff here, I have to read through and understand all of this code in order for me to even know what that comment means. It gives me absolutely no information whatsoever what's going on here. The only way for me to know what this method actually does is to read through the code, go through all of this, and maybe even go and look at some API documentation or whatever, because it's doing network requests. There's all kinds of stuff going on here, right? So this is also, in my opinion, a bad comment, because there's like the amount of information I'm getting here is absolutely nothing in comparison, like, and it doesn't stand in proportion to the amount of code that is actually here. There's so much business logic going on here that I just can't make any sense of it, right? So let's talk about what I like to call good or decent comments and stuff of that nature. So here's a decent comment. Now, the rule of thumb that I like to have when I write a comment is that either a comment is a compromise for me. In other words, I have something that is, I can't express it because I am a fallible really shitty software developer at this point in time, and I can't make this problem nice. I can't write software the way that I want in order to solve this problem for whatever reason. So I put a comment to try to kind of explain the reasoning behind why I made a certain decision. That's one way of looking at it. Another way is to, in my opinion, is to have the mindset that your comment should explain the context of the code. Because if you have a nice method name or a nice piece of code that kind of describes what it's doing, you don't have to explain what the code is doing if it's very easy to understand what the code is doing by just reading the declaration of the method or the function. But sometimes you have the situation where you kind of have to know things that is outside of the code that you are reading. So here is an example of that. So get user calls yada yada yada, and it returns an array of users. Now this is a decent comment because I don't care about like get users. Okay, I kind of figure out that I'm going to get some users right. But what I don't know is what this endpoint actually does. I have no idea what this could have been. Like get users, it could have returned an object as well. So this is kind of useful. At least now I know that there's an array that's coming back. Do you see the mindset here? Because the only way I could be really certain of how this code would run and what this JSON return value, this is, you know, unfortunately not a typed language. So the only way for me to really know that is through this comment. So this is a sort of helpful comment. It told me that, yeah, it's an array. It's not the best comment in the world, but it's pretty useful. So what I like to consider is a good comment is, as I said earlier, it's a comment that explains a more holistic context to me. Because when I read this function here, okay, generate user statistics. Okay, so I call an endpoint, get some data, and then I return that data. Yeah, that's pretty easy. That doesn't really explain to me the impact of doing this network call. What does this network call actually have? What does it do? I don't know. So I have this comment here. This will schedule a job on the server that runs once a day. Statistics will be stored for 30 days. Favor has statistics or get statistics to avoid generating excess stats and strains on the system. Now this is a great comment because without me, like by reading this, I now know what impact this line has on my system. I now know that if I call this function, there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen. And I kind of get a hint at that this is not just something that I can call as much as I want, because there's going to be an impact on the server of things. So that's what I like to think about when I think about comments, because I don't want my comments to just reflect the code that is on this page, on these lines, because frankly, it wouldn't give me all that much value. But what's really valuable is that now I know what the impact of my code is going to be on the system. And that's, I think, is pretty useful. So here we have something like why no comment, because their method name is good enough. Has user statistics. All right. That's a fairly, like, this is another like opinionated case. Like, do you really need to set a comment here? As I said earlier, do I really need a comment here that says, oh yeah, gets the user statistics? Now you can make an argument that you could make some nice comment about like the impact of this and how this is generated and stuff of that nature. But in this scenario, I didn't choose to actually do that. And then finally, we have something like this. This will return a statistics object created by generate user statistics, but if none are found, it returns an empty object with a 404. Now this is also useful, because now I know what this will actually do. And I also know that there's a method call here. This will return a statistics object created by generate user statistics. Now what this tells me is that, alright, in order for this method to work in the expected way, so I can just get the user statistics, then I have to call this first. I have to call this function, at least this function needs to be called at least once, because I now know that if I do that, I will generate a scheduled job that will at some point create a statistics object that will be stored for 30 days. And if I call this method, I have to do that after I have already created the statistics object. So this is now this comment is now helping me understand the flow of how this API or this interaction is going to work. And that's exactly what I like to think about when I write comments. I don't try to explain my code through comments. I try to write clean software that illustrates, like that is clean enough that a reader can understand it by just my signature on my methods and like all of that good stuff. But when I have an interaction or a flow of events that takes place, or I have something that is outside of the code that I am writing, something that the reader needs to know in order for this code to make sense, then I try to add a comment that explains the impact of the software and how that fits together into the rest of the application. That's just the way that I like to think about comments, and hopefully you have a great day.